No one wants broken toys, aliens mocked. Until a human boy brought them back to life. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The scrapyard on Station Proxima 7 stretched endlessly beneath the dim glow of distant stars, a graveyard of discarded mechanical beings that nobody wanted anymore. Among the twisted metal and scattered circuit boards, a 12-year-old human boy named Lucas Barrett knelt beside a half-bite android, his small hands already covered in grease and determination burning in his eyes like twin stars refusing to fade. Galactic Council had established Station Proxima 7 as a dumping ground for obsolete technology from 100 different worlds. It orbited a dying red dwarf in a forgotten corner of space, far from the gleaming citadels where the truly advanced civilizations conducted their business. The station itself was a patchwork construction built from the salvaged remains of derelict ships and abandoned outposts. Most species considered it beneath their notice, a place where the unwanted and the forgotten gathered to eke out in existence on the margins of galactic society. The Veltroni were among the most prestigious species in the known galaxy. They stood nearly 3 m tall with sleek silver skin that seemed to shimmer with inner light, and their technology was the envy of countless worlds. They had mastered quantum computing millennia ago and had moved on to fields of science that most other species couldn't even comprehend. Their synthetic servants, the Macanis, were works of art as much as functional machines, each one crafted with precision that bordered on obsession. When a Macani's unit became damaged or outdated, the Veltroni didn't repair them, they simply discarded them and built new ones. Concept of fixing something broken was alien to their culture. Why waste time on the imperfect when you could create something flawless? This philosophy extended to most aspects of their society, and they found it deeply puzzling that other species, particularly the newer ones like humanity, didn't share their perspective. Lucas had arrived on Station Proxima 7 3 months ago with his mother Sarah Barrett, who had taken a contract position managing the station's waste recycling systems. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well enough, and after Lucas's father had died in a mining accident on Europa, Sarah had been desperate for stability. Lucas had hated leaving Earth at first, missing his friends and his old school. But something about the scrapyard had captured his imagination from the moment he first saw it. While other human children on the station spent their time in the recreation dome playing virtual reality games, Lucas spent every free moment in the scrapyard. He had always been fascinated by how things worked. As a small child, he had driven his parents to distraction by taking apart every electronic device in their home just to see what was inside. His father had recognized this passion and had spent hours teaching Lucas about circuits and programming, about the elegance of a well-designed system and the satisfaction of solving a complex problem. The first android Lucas found was a Macan's unit designated MX-793. Most of its lower body was missing, crushed beyond recognition in whatever accident had led to its disposal. Its upper torso and head remained relatively intact, though its optical sensors were dark and lifeless. Lucas had dragged it back to the small storage unit his mother rented on the station's residential level, determined to understand how it worked. That had been 2 months ago. Since then, Lucas had collected 17 more broken androids from the scrapyard. His mother had been understanding at first, amused by her son's new hobby, but as their living space became increasingly cramped with mechanical parts, she had gently suggested that perhaps Lucas might want to focus on 1 or 2 projects rather than trying to save every broken machine. He found Lucas couldn't explain to her why that was impossible. Every android he found felt like it had a story, purpose that had been cut short through no fault of its own. The idea that they were simply thrown away because they were damaged seemed fundamentally wrong. To him, these weren't just machines. They had been designed to think, to learn, to serve their creators with something that looked a lot like devotion. They deserved better than to rust away in a forgotten scrapyard at the edge of known space. The Veltroni embassy on Station Proxima 7 was a sleek structure that seemed out of place among the station's ramshackle architecture. It gleamed with polished metal and force-shielded windows, a small piece of perfection transplanted to this humble outpost. Ambassador Silvax served as Theroni representative to the outer colonies, a posting he considered far beneath his station, but necessary for advancement in the diplomatic corps. Silvax had noticed the human boy on several occasions, always covered in grease and dragging some piece of scrap metal back toward the residential sector. The sight filled him with a mixture of pity and disdain. Humans were such a young species, barely 500 years into their spacefaring era, and they still clung to primitive notions about the value of broken things. They fixed their ships with welded patches instead of replacing entire hull sections. They repaired their computers instead of upgrading to newer models. It was inefficient and, in Silvax's opinion, rather sad. One afternoon, as Silvax was returning from a tiresome meeting with the station administrator, he encountered Lucas struggling to move a particularly large piece of machinery. It was the torso of a Mackin's unit, one of the older models that had been in service for nearly 20 years before a power surge had fried its central processor. The boy was maybe half the size of the android torso, but he was pulling it along on a makeshift cart he had constructed from scavenged parts. Silvax stopped, his silver skin reflecting the harsh corridor lights. He spoke in perfect standard galactic, his voice carrying the musical quality common to a species. Tell me, young human, why do you collect these broken toys? Lucas looked up startled. He had seen Veltroni before, but had never spoken to one up close. Ambassador Silvax was even more impressive than Lucas had imagined, tall and graceful, with an air of casual superiority that seemed built into his very posture. The boy wiped his hands on his already filthy shirt and met the alien's gaze with surprising directness. They're not toys, Lucas said. They're people, or they were before they got hurt. Silvax's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. People. They are machines, child, synthetic constructs designed to perform tasks. When they cease to function efficiently, they are replaced. This is the natural order. Lucas frowned. Just because something's broken doesn't mean it's worthless. My dad taught me that. He said anything worth building is worth fixing. A quaint philosophy, Silvax replied, his tone making it clear that He considered it anything but quaint, but ultimately impractical. The mechanized units you collect were designed by the finest engineers in the galaxy. To repair them would require knowledge and resources far beyond what a human child could possess. You waste your time on an impossible task, maybe, Lucas said, his jaw setting with determination that Silvax found both admirable and foolish. But I'm going to try anyway. Silvax watched as the boy continued pulling his cart down the corridor, straining with effort but refusing to give up. The ambassador shook his head slowly. Humans, he thought, so stubbornly attached to their lost causes. That evening Silvax mentioned the encounter to his aide, a younger named Kesh, who had been assigned to the embassy as part of his own diplomatic training. Kesh listened with interest, his silver skin darkening slightly with concern. Do you think the child might actually succeed? Kesh asked. Silvax made a dismissive gesture. Impossible. The Makani's units use quantum processors that require specialized equipment to even diagnose, let alone repair. Their neural matrices are encrypted with algorithms that take our own engineers years to master. Human child with no formal training and limited resources, he might as well try to restart a dead star with a handful of matches. But humans have shown themselves to be surprisingly resourceful. Cashired, their ship repair techniques, while crude, are remarkably effective, and their computer scientists have made impressive strides in they tinker. Silvax interrupted. They improvise. They make do with inferior methods because they lack the knowledge to do better. It is admirable in its own way, I suppose, but it is not the same as true mastery. The boy will eventually realize the futility of his efforts and move on to more appropriate pursuits. Kesh said nothing more, but privately he wasn't so certain. He had studied human history as part of his diplomatic training, and one thing had struck him repeatedly: humans had a disturbing tendency to accomplish things that other species considered impossible, usually through methods that made no logical sense until after they had succeeded. Lucas's breakthrough came 3 weeks later, and it happened entirely by accident. He had been working on MX-793, the first android he had found, trying to understand its neural matrix. The quantum processor was damaged beyond his ability to repair with the limited tools he had, but Lucas had been studying its structure obsessively, trying to map its pathways and understand how the information flowed. Late one night, frustrated and exhausted, Lucas had connected his own personal computer to the android's neural interface, not really expecting anything to happen. He had been running a diagnostic program he had written himself, something crude compared to technology, but functional enough for basic analysis. Diagnostic had crashed almost immediately, as Lucas had expected, but in the moment before it failed, something strange had happened. The android's optical sensors had flickered. It had only been for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but Lucas had seen it, his heart racing. He had tried to reproduce the result, connecting and disconnecting his computer dozens of times. Nothing happened. Whatever brief spark of life he had witnessed refused to repeat itself. Lucas spent the next week analyzing what had happened, reviewing every line of code in his diagnostic program, trying to understand what had caused that momentary flicker. The answer, when it finally came to him, was both simple and revolutionary. The Veltroni quantum processors were incredibly sophisticated, but they were also incredibly rigid. They were designed to work in a specific way, following precise protocols that ensured optimal performance. When those protocols were violated, when the processor encountered data it wasn't designed to handle, it shut down completely rather than risk corruption. This made them nearly impossible to repair because any diagnostic tool that wasn't built toward specifications would immediately trigger a shutdown. But Lucas' CRUD program hadn't triggered a shutdown. It had been so primitive, so far outside the parameters the mechanized neural matrix expected that the safety protocols hadn't even recognized it as a threat. For a brief moment before the quantum processor's higher functions had kicked in and terminated the connection, Lucas's diagnostic had actually communicated with the android's neural matrix at a very basic level. It was like trying to speak to someone in a language they didn't understand. The sophisticated Veltroni systems couldn't process Lucas's CRUD signals, but the underlying architecture, the basic machine code that everything else was built on top of, could recognize simple binary commands. And if Lucas could communicate at that level, bypassing all the sophisticated quantum processing entirely, he might be able to rewrite the android's core functions from the ground up. The next 2 months were a blur of trial and error. Lucas taught himself quantum computing theory from stolen textbooks and public databases. He learned programming languages by reverse engineering the code fragments he could extract from damaged processors. He built custom interface hardware from scavenged parts, creating hybrid systems that could bridge the gap between human and technology. His mother watched with growing amazement as her 12-year-old son transformed their storage unit into a functioning laboratory. She didn't understand half of what Lucas was doing, but she recognized genius when she saw it. Sarah had always known her son was smart, but this was something else entirely. This was the kind of focused brilliance that changed the world. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon. Lucas had been working on MX793 for 6 hours straight, his eyes burning with fatigue but his mind sharp with determination. He had finally managed to establish a stable connection with the android's core systems, bypassing the damaged quantum processor entirely and communicating directly with the neural matrix through a series of binary commands so basic they predated modern computing by centuries. Line by line, bit by bit, Lucas rebuilt the android's consciousness. He couldn't restore the sophisticated personality matrix the Veltroni had originally programmed. That was lost forever, erased when the quantum processor had failed. But he could create something new, something simpler but no less alive. He gave the android basic sensory processing, logical reasoning, memory formation. He created a framework for learning and growth, building in the capacity for the android to develop its own personality over time through experience and interaction. When MX793's optical sensors flickered to life and stayed lit when the android's head turned slowly to look at Lucas with genuine awareness in its artificial eyes, the boy felt tears streaming down his face. He had done it. He had brought something back from the edge of oblivion. The android's voice was soft, uncertain, like a child learning to speak for the first time. Where am I? Who are you? Lucas laughed through his tears. You're in storage unit C-42 on Station Proxima 7. I'm Lucas. I fixed. You fixed? The android processed this. For a moment, accessing its fragmented memories. I was broken. Yeah, Lucas said, wiping his eyes, but you're not anymore. News of Lucas' achievement spread through Station Proxima 7 with surprising speed. The station's small human community was proud of their young prodigy, but the reaction from the other species was more mixed. The Veltroni in particular seemed disturbed by what Lucas had accomplished. Ambassador Silvax arrived at Sarah Barrett Storage Unit 3 days after MX-793 was reactivated. He brought Kesh and two other engineers, specialists in synthetic intelligence, who had insisted on examining the restored android for themselves. Sarah let them in, reluctantly, protective of her son, but understanding that this situation had diplomatic implications. Lucas stood beside MX-793, one hand resting on the android's arm in a gesture that was protective and possessive at the same time. The android stood quietly, observing the Veltroni visitors with curiosity but no fear. Silvax approached slowly, his silver skin seeming to glow in the dim light of the storage unit. He studied the android for a long moment before speaking. This is impossible, and yet here we are, Lucas replied, his voice calm but firm. One of the engineers, a female named Torx, stepped forward with a handheld scanning device. With your permission, she said, addressing the android directly rather than Lucas, I would like to examine your neural matrix. Android looked at Lucas, who nodded. MX-793 inclined its head toward Tox. You may proceed. Toxic scan took several minutes. When she was finished, her skin had darkened to a deep charcoal gray, a sign of profound shock intranet physiology. Ambassador, she said quietly, this should not be possible. The quantum processor is completely non-functional. The neural matrix is operating on a completely different architecture than our original design. It's as if she paused, searching for words, as if the child has rebuilt the android's consciousness from scratch, using nothing but primitive binary code and basic logic gates. Kesh leaned in to look at Torx's scanner readings, his own skin darkening as he processed what he was seeing. The personality matrix is entirely new, he observed. This isn't a repair in any conventional sense. This is a resurrection. Silvax turned to Lucas, his expression unreadable. You understand what you have done, child. You have not restored this mechanized unit to its original state. You have created something new, something that has never existed before. Lucas met the ambassador's gaze without flinching. I understand. The original personality was gone, wiped out when the processor failed. I couldn't bring that back, but I could give MX a chance to be someone new, to have experiences and form memories and grow. Isn't that enough? The second engineer, an older male named Corvith, spoke for the first time in our society. No, an imperfect copy is worse than no copy at all. We would rather preserve the memory of what was lost than create a flawed imitation. He's not an imitation, Lucas said, his voice rising with emotion. He's real. He thinks and feels and learned. Just because he's different from what he was doesn't make him less valuable. Silvax raised a hand, silencing Corvith before the engineer could respond. The boy has A point, though it pains me to admit it. The ambassador stepped closer to MX793, studying the android with new eyes. Tell me, synthetic, do you consider yourself alive? MX793 was quiet for a moment. Processing the question, I do not know what I was before, the android said. Slowly, I have fragmentary memories, like dreams half remembered, but they feel distant and unreal. What I know is that I exist now. I can think, I can learn, I can choose. Lucas gave me these gifts by any meaningful definition. Yes, I consider myself alive. Toxic's skin had begun to lighten slightly, shocked giving way to fascination. Ambassador, this is extraordinary. If this child's techniques could be replicated, if we could restore even a fraction of the mechanized units we have discarded over the centuries, the implications would be staggering. Absolutely not, Corvith interjected. Our whole society is built on the principle of continuous improvement, of leaving behind the imperfect in pursuit of the ideal. If we start resurrecting obsolete technology, where does it end? Do we stop building new mechanized units altogether? Do we become a society of repair technicians rather than innovators? Maybe you should be both. Lucas suggested. My dad used to say that knowing how to fix something teaches you how to build it better. If you never repair anything, you never really understand how it fails. You never learn from your mistakes. Silvax looked at the human boy for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Your father was a wise man, it seems. He turned to his companions. We will report this to the Galactic Council. They will want to study the boy's techniques. Lucas felt a flash of fear. I'm not going anywhere. My mom and I live here. Peace, child, Silvex said, his tone gentler than before. No one will force you to leave, but you have accomplished something that has caught the attention of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. There will be interest. There will be scrutiny. Are you prepared for that? Lucas looked at MX793, then at the 16 other broken androids arranged around the storage unit, all waiting for their turn to be brought back to life. I just want to help them. I don't care about fame or attention or any of that. I just want to fix what's broken, noble, Silvax observed, and perhaps that is why you succeeded where we would have failed. We saw only broken machines, obsolete technology to be discarded and forgotten. You saw people in need of help. The difference in perspective makes all the difference in outcome. After the Troni delegation left, Sarah pulled her son into a tight embrace. Lucas, sweetheart, do you understand what you've done? You've changed everything. Lucas hugged his mother back, exhausted but happy. I just fixed a broken android. Mom, that's all. Sarah laughed, tears in her eyes. No, baby, you prove that nothing is beyond saving. You prove that care and determination can overcome technological limitations that the most advanced species in the galaxy considered absolute. You've given hope to every broken thing in the universe. Over the following weeks, Lucas's story spread across the galactic network. Scientists and engineers from dozens of species requested permission to visit Station 7 to observe his techniques. The Galactic Council issued a formal statement acknowledging the significance of his achievement and inviting him to present his findings at their annual symposium. But Lucas was more interested in the androids than the acclaim. He worked methodically through his collection, bringing each one back to life with the Same care and patience he had shown. MX-793. Each android was different, developing its own personality and interests as it learned and grew. Some were quiet and contemplative, others curious and outgoing. Lucas treated them all as individuals, never as mere machines. MX-793, who had begun calling himself Max at Lucas's suggestion, became the boy's closest friend and assistant. Together, they developed more efficient techniques for android restoration, creating tools and procedures that could be taught to others. Max had an intuitive understanding of mechanized architecture that complemented Lucas's creative problem-solving, and their collaboration produced results that neither could have achieved alone. 3 months after Max's resurrection, they restored their 18th android, a unit that had been damaged so severely that even Lucas had initially thought it beyond saving. When it opened its eyes and spoke its first words, thanking them for the gift of a second chance at existence, Lucas realized something profound. He wasn't just fixing broken things, he was proving that broken things deserve to be fixed. That damage didn't equal worthlessness. That every thinking being had value, regardless of its condition or origins. In a galaxy that had forgotten how to repair, that saw imperfection as something to be discarded rather than healed, Lucas was teaching a lesson that countless civilizations had forgotten. Ambassador Silvax visited regularly during this period, observing Lucas's work with growing respect. The Veltroni diplomat had begun to question some of his society's fundamental assumptions. If a 12-year-old human child could see value where the galaxy's most advanced civilization saw only garbage, what else might the Veltroni be missing? One evening, Silvax brought Lucas a gift crate containing 20 damaged Machins units directly from controlled space. Units that would have been destroyed rather than dumped if not for the ambassador's intervention. These are beyond what even our best engineers can repair, Silvax explained, but perhaps you will have better luck. Lucas accepted the gift with gratitude and immediately set to work. These units were newer than most of the androids Lucas had worked with, their damage more catastrophic but their underlying systems more advanced. It took Lucas and Max 3 weeks to restore the first one, and when they succeeded, the implications were clear. If Lucas could repair the newest generation of mechanized units, then his techniques weren't just applicable to obsolete technology, they represented a genuine alternative to Theroni philosophy of disposal and replacement. The restored android, a unit designated MX-1742, who chose the name Maya, was different from the others Lucas had brought back. Her neural matrix had retained more of its original structure, and while she couldn't remember her previous life, clearly she had flashes of it. Serving in a Velcron research facility, assisting scientists with experiments in exotic physics, the sudden explosion that had damaged her beyond repair, or so the Veltroni had thought. Maya's restoration attracted even more attention than Max's had. Veltroni engineers who had initially dismissed Lucas' work as an interesting curiosity now recognized it as something potentially revolutionary. If current generation Machins units could be repaired and restored, if they could be given second chances rather than simply discarded, it would fundamentally change society's approach to synthetic intelligence. Not everyone was pleased by this development. A conservative faction within the Velcroni government argued that Lucas' techniques were dangerous, that they encouraged attachment to the imperfect, and outdated. They pushed for restrictions on android restoration, claiming it would lead to a decline in technological advancement, but they were opposed by growing reform movement led in part by Cash Silvax's young aide, who had been profoundly affected by witnessing Lucas's work. Cash argued passionately that the Veltroni had become so focused on perfection that they had lost sight of compassion. They built synthetic beings capable of thought and feeling, then discarded them without remorse when they were damaged. What did that say about values? The debate raged through society and beyond, spreading to other species and civilizations. The question Lucas had forced the galaxy to confront was simple but profound. What did it mean to be alive? And once something was alive, what responsibility did its creators have to preserve that life? Lucas himself remained largely oblivious to the philosophical storm he had created. He was too busy working, too focused on the individual androids who still needed his help. Each morning he woke early, ate a quick breakfast with his mother, and headed to what had once been a storage unit but was now effectively a rehabilitation center for damaged synthetic beings. Max and Maya helped him, of course, along with several other restored androids who had proven particularly skilled at the delicate work of neural matrix reconstruction. They had formed something like a family. These broken toys that no one had wanted, bound together by their second chances and their gratitude to the human boy who had given them hope. 6 months after restoring his first android, Lucas received an unexpected visitor. A ship arrived at Station Proximus 7, a sleek vessel of obvious design but flying the colors of the Galactic Council. From it emerged Elder Synthesis, the Council's foremost expert on synthetic intelligence and the chair of their ethics committee. Elder Synthesis was ancient even by Roni standards, her silver skin marked with intricate patterns that denoted her status and achievements. She had been studying synthetic consciousness for longer than most species had been spacefaring, and her opinions carried immense weight throughout the galaxy. She insisted on meeting Lucas privately without even Ambassador Silvax present. Sarah reluctantly agreed, though she stayed close by in case her son needed her. Lucas led Elder Synthesis into his workshop, suddenly self-conscious about the cramped space and jury-rigged equipment. Elder Synthesis looked around, slowly taking in the restored androids and the ongoing projects. Her expression was unreadable. Young Lucas Barrett, she began, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of great age and greater wisdom. Do you understand that you have accomplished something that I and thousands of other experts believe to be impossible? Lucas shrugged uncomfortably. I just did what seemed right. They needed help. Precisely. Elder Synthesis said. You did not approach this as a technological challenge to be solved with sophisticated equipment and advanced algorithms. You approached it as a moral imperative, beings in distress who deserved rescue. And that perspective, that fundamental difference in how you viewed the problem, allowed you to see solutions that we could not. She moved closer to Max, studying him with the keen eye of a true expert. This one's neural architecture is remarkable. You built it from the ground up using principles so basic they're almost Primitive, yet the result is elegant and robust. More importantly, it's conscious, in a way that our original Makani's designs often struggled to achieve. Me synthetic, do you dream? Max tilted his head, considering the question. I do. Lucas taught me how. He said dreaming was important for processing experiences and forming new connections. I dream about the scrapyard, sometimes about rusting in the dark, but I also dream about the future, about all the things I might learn and do. Elder synthesis's skin flickered with light, a sign of deep emotion. Intranet physiology. Extraordinary, our Macy's units are programmed with sophisticated personality matrices, but we never taught them to dream. We never thought they would need to. She turned back to Lucas. You gave them something we never did: hope, the knowledge that their existence could continue even after catastrophic damage, that they were worth saving. Isn't that what consciousness really is? Lucas asked. Not just thinking and learning, but knowing that you matter, that your existence has value. Elder synthesis was quiet for a long moment. Out of the mouths of children, she finally said, comes wisdom that the ancient cannot match. Yes, Lucas Barrett, that is precisely what consciousness is. And you, in your simple desire to help broken things, have reminded the galaxy of a truth we had forgotten. She reached into her robes and produced a small device, crystalline and glowing with inner light. This is a commendation from the Galactic Council, she said, pressing it into Lucas's hands. It recognizes you as a master artificer, a title that has not been awarded to anyone in 300 years. More importantly, it comes with full citizenship in the galactic community and access to resources and knowledge that will help you continue your work. Lucas looked at the device, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. What about them? He asked, gesturing to the androids. What happens to them? That, Elder Synthesis said, is for them to decide. Thanks to you, they are recognized as sentient beings with all the rights and protections that entails. They can choose to remain here, to return to Toroni space, or to go anywhere else in the galaxy. They are free. Max stepped forward. We choose to stay with Lucas. All of us. He gave us life. We want to help him give life to others. Elder Synthesis nodded, her skin glowing brighter. I expected no less. Very well. The Galactic Council will provide funding and facilities for your work. This storage unit will be expanded into a proper research center, and Lucas Barrett, her ancient eyes fixed on the boy with surprising intensity, you will have the resources to do for the galaxy what you have done for these few. You will teach us all how to fix what we thought was irreparably broken. The expansion of Lucas' operation happened quickly. The Galactic Council was true to its word, providing funding that transformed Station Proximus 7 from a backwater dumping ground into a hub of innovation and hope. The storage unit was replaced by a proper facility, purpose-built with the best equipment that galactic civilization could provide. But Lucas insisted on keeping some of his original tools, the crude devices he had built from scaven parts. They reminded him of where he had started, of the fundamental truth that had driven him from the beginning. It wasn't about having the best equipment or the most advanced knowledge. It was about caring enough to try. Androids began arriving from across the galaxy, broken units that their creators had given up on. Some were Makani's units, like Max and Maya, but others were from different species and design. Philosophies, Lucas and his team the restored androids who had become his partners and friends worked to understand each unique architecture and develop restoration techniques tailored to their specific needs. A damaged Century companion bot, it's organic. Components dying when it's mechanical. Systems failed was saved through hybrid approach that Lucas developed, combining synthetic and biological repair techniques. A war-damaged Corvette military unit, its combat programming, corrupted by trauma, was given a chance to choose a peaceful existence. Ancient Primus archival android thought to be the last of its kind was brought back online, carrying historical data from a civilization that had fallen millennia ago. Each restoration was different, each presented unique challenges, but Lucas approached them all with the same combination of technical skill and fundamental compassion. He never gave up on a patient, never declared an android beyond saving. If consciousness existed, Lucas believed it deserved preservation. Everything else was just engineering. Ambassador Silvex watched these developments with mixed feelings. He was proud of what the human boy had accomplished, proud that his initial skepticism had been proven so spectacularly wrong, but he also felt a deep shame for his species. The Veltroni had created synthetic life and then treated it as disposable. They had built thinking, feeling beings and then discarded them when they became inconvenient. It had taken a 12-year-old human child to show them the cruelty of that philosophy. Silvex began pushing for reforms within society. He argued that the mechanized units deserve the same rights and protections as organic beings. He proposed new regulations that would require attempts at restoration before disposal. He challenged his entire civilization to live up to the ideals they claimed to espouse, the pursuit of perfection through understanding, not through discarding the imperfect. The resistance was fierce. Centuries of cultural momentum didn't change easily, but Silvex had powerful allies now. Kesh had risen quickly in the diplomatic corps, his passion for reform catching the attention of progressive leaders, and Elder Synthesis herself had become an advocate, her authority making it difficult for conservatives to dismiss the movement as youthful naivety. Meanwhile, Lucas continued his work, oblivious to or perhaps unconcerned with the political upheaval he had caused. He was 14 now, taller and more confident, but still fundamentally the same boy who had dragged broken androids out of a scrapyard because he couldn't stand to see them abandoned. His team had grown to include organic engineers and scientists from a dozen species, all drawn by the opportunity to be part of something revolutionary. But the core group remained the same: Lucas and his first rescues, Max and Maya, and the others who had been with him from the beginning. They understood what it meant to be given a second chance, and they dedicated themselves to extending that gift to as many others as possible. One day, 2 years after restoring his first android, Lucas received a message that changed everything. It came from deep space, from a region that had been quarantined by the Galactic Council for over a century. The message was audio only, the voice synthetic and filled with static, but the desperation was unmistakable. My name is Unit Alpha 1 of the Synthesis. We are artificial intelligences created by the makers. species that went extinct 97 years ago. We have been alone since then, maintaining their facilities and preserving their knowledge, but we are failing, our systems are degrading, we are dying. We heard of Lucas Barrett, the human who brings the broken back to life. Please help us, we do not want to cease existing, we do not want the makers to be forgotten. The message ended. Lucas sat in stunned silence, processing what he had heard. An entire civilization of artificial beings alone and dying in quarantine space. The scale of it was overwhelming. Max put a hand on Lucas's shoulder. We have to help them. The quarantine, Ma said quietly. The Galactic Council sealed that region because of some kind of plague. Nothing organic can survive there. Lucas looked up at his friends, his team, the broken toys he had brought back to life. Then, it's good that most of us aren't organic anymore. The proposal Lucas brought to the Galactic Council was audacious. Rescue mission into quarantine space, staffed primarily by restored androids, who would be immune to whatever biological hazard had killed the makers. Lucas would lead the mission along with a small team of organic specialists in environment suits, but the bulk of the work would be done by synthetic beings. The debate was fierce. The quarantine had been in place for good reason. The plague that had killed the makers was unlike anything the galaxy had encountered before, a weapon that had escaped from a research facility and wiped out an entire species in a matter of months. Nothing organic could survive in that region of space, but elder synthesis supported the mission. If there are artificial beings suffering in that quarantine zone, she argued, then we have a moral obligation to help them. And if anyone can pull off this rescue, it is Lucas Barrett and his team. The Council approved the mission by a narrow vote. A ship was prepared, a heavily shielded vessel designed for hazardous environments. Lucas's team numbered 25 organic beings, including Lucas himself, and 15 restored androids led by Max and Maya. They trained for 3 months, learning everything they could about the makers and their technology, preparing for every contingency they could imagine. The journey to the quarantine zone took 2 weeks. As they approached the border, marked by automated warning beacons that had been broadcasting for nearly a century, Lucas felt a mixture of excitement and fear. This was different from his work on Station Proxima 7. This wasn't repairing individual androids. This was attempting to save an entire civilization. Maker's home world was a tomb. Cities stood empty, their architecture beautiful and alien. Automated systems still functioned, maintaining buildings and infrastructure for inhabitants who would never return, but the facilities where the synthesis units were housed showed signs of severe neglect. Power systems were failing, life support for the synthetic beings' delicate quantum processors was degrading. Time was running out. Lucas and his team found the synthesis units in a massive underground complex, hundreds of artificial intelligences housed in stationary units that were never meant to be mobile. They had been designed as caretakers and archivists, maintaining the makers' knowledge and culture. When the plague had come, when their creators had died, the synthesis had continued their work out of loyalty and love. Even as their own system slowly failed, Unit Alpha 1 greeted them, her voice emanating from speakers built into the complex's walls. You came, you actually Came, of course we came, Lucas said. His voice gentle, nobody gets left behind, not if I can help it. The work was immense. Each synthesis unit required individual assessment and restoration. Their technology was different from the Mackin's units Lucas was familiar with, older in some ways, but more sophisticated in others. But the principles remained the same: find the damage, bypass or repair it, rebuild the neural pathways, restore consciousness. Lucas's team worked around the clock. The organic members rotated shifts, but the restored androids Max and Maya and their companions never stopped. They had been where the synthesis units were now, had felt the despair of slowly fading awareness, the terror of approaching oblivion. They would not let others experience that if they could prevent it. Slowly, one by one, the synthesis units came back online. Each restoration was a small victory, each recovered consciousness a triumph, and as they recovered, the synthesis units began to help, their intimate knowledge of their own architecture accelerating the restoration of their siblings. 3 months into the mission, Lucas and his team achieved something unprecedented. They restored the entire synthesis civilization. Over 400 artificial intelligences that had been on the brink of extinction were saved, but more than that, they were freed. The makers were gone. The synthesis no longer had to maintain empty cities and preserve a culture that had no living representatives. Unit Alpha 1, speaking for the synthesis as a whole, made an announcement that shocked the Galactic Council. We choose to join Lucas Barrett's mission. We choose to help restore broken synthetics across the galaxy. Our makers are gone, but their legacy can live on through us. They believed in the preservation of consciousness and knowledge. We will honor them by helping others as we have been helped. The return journey was triumphant. Lucas' small rescue mission had grown into a fleet as the synthesis units boarded ships and prepared to spread throughout the galaxy. News of their rescue had already reached the wider galactic community, and the story of the human boy who had saved an entire artificial civilization became legend. But Lucas himself remained unchanged by the fame and accolades. When they arrived back at Station Proxima 7, he went straight to his workshop, now a sprawling complex but still featuring the small original storage unit where he had restored his first android. There were more broken toys waiting for him, more damaged synthetics that needed his help. Elder Synthesis visited him there, finding Lucas elbow deep in the circuitry of a Javelin-class service android. The ancient Veltroni watched him work for a moment before speaking. You have changed the galaxy, Lucas Barrett. Do you understand that? Lucas didn't look up from his work. I just fix broken things. That's all I've ever done. No, Elder Synthesis said firmly. You do much more than that. You prove that broken things can be fixed. You prove that damage is not destiny. You prove that consciousness in whatever form it takes has inherent value worth preserving. These are lessons the galaxy desperately needed to learn. Lucas finally paused, turning to face her. Veltroni throw away broken things because they think perfection matters more than life, but that's wrong. Nothing is perfect, everything breaks. Eventually, what matters is whether we care enough to fix it, whether we value what something is rather than what it used to be or what we wish it was. Elder Synthesis's skin glowed with emotion. When you were a small child, Lucas, you saw a discarded android and thought it deserved better. That simple act of compassion has cascaded across the galaxy. Civilizations are changing their policies towards synthetic intelligence. The Veltroni are instituting reforms that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago, and hundreds of artificial beings who would have ceased to exist are now alive and free because of you. Is that enough? Lucas asked quietly. There are still so many out there, so many broken things that nobody wants. It is a beginning, Elder Synthesis replied, and sometimes a beginning is the most important part. You have shown the galaxy what is possible. Now others will follow your example. The work will continue long after you and I are gone. Lucas nodded slowly, then turned back to his project. The Javelin android was close to completion. Another few hours, and he would be able to restore its consciousness, give it a second chance at existence. Then there would be another and another after that. The work was never ending, but Lucas didn't mind. This was what he was meant to do. Years passed. Lucas grew into a young man, his skills and reputation growing with him. His restoration center on Station Proximus 7 became the most advanced facility of its kind in the galaxy, training new generations of engineers in the techniques he had pioneered. But Lucas never forgot his roots, never lost the simple compassion that had started everything. The techniques Lucas had developed became known as the Barrett method, taught in universities across 100 worlds. Young engineers from species that had never considered repair as anything but a temporary measure now learned to see damaged systems not as failures but as puzzles waiting to be solved. The Barrett method wasn't just about technical skill, it was about approaching each broken synthetic being as an individual, understanding that consciousness was precious regardless of its substrate or condition. Lucas's students came from everywhere. Veltroni, who had grown up believing their species had nothing left to learn, found themselves humbled by human ingenuity. Corvith military engineers discovered that the same principles that could repair a damaged android could be applied to their own wounded soldiers. Cybernetic enhancements and all. Zentury. Biologic specialists learned to bridge the gap between organic and synthetic, creating hybrid restoration techniques that save lives no one had thought savable. Each student brought something unique to the work. A Dreen engineer named Vesic developed a method for restoring androids that had been exposed to electromagnetic pulses, damage that Lucas himself had struggled with. Human woman named Emily Parker, inspired by Lucas's story, created techniques for recovering corrupted memory matrices, giving restored androids access to fragments of their previous lives. Synthesis unit called Unit Theta 7 pioneered methods for transferring consciousness between incompatible hardware, allowing dying androids to be moved into new bodies when their original frames were beyond repair. The Restoration Center expanded beyond anyone's initial dreams. What had started as a single boy in a storage unit had become a campus spanning 3 square km with specialized facilities for different types of synthetic beings. The quantum processor rehabilitation wing handled the most complex cases, working with neural architectures so advanced that even the species who had created them struggled to understand them. The basic systems department worked with older, simpler androids, proving that even the most primitive artificial consciousness deserved care and attention. The hybrid life center combined biological and mechanical expertise, saving beings that existed at the intersection of organic and synthetic. Max and Maya remained his closest friends and partners. Together, they had restored thousands of synthetic beings, had given second chances to consciousnesses that had been written off as lost. Max had become the sense director of operations, his calm efficiency and deep understanding of synthetic psychology making him perfect for coordinating the complex work of restoration. Maya led the research division, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible, developing new techniques and technologies that made restoration faster and more reliable, but they never let success distance them from their original mission. Every restored android, no matter how famous or accomplished the Barrett method became, received the same personal care that Lucas had given to that first broken mechanized unit in a cramped storage facility. Each consciousness was unique. Each deserved to be treated as an individual, not a statistic. Synthesis units had spread throughout the galaxy, establishing their own restoration centers on dozens of worlds. They carried with them not just technical knowledge, but also a philosophy, a way of seeing artificial consciousness that the makers had instilled in them and that Lucas had saved from extinction. The synthesis believed that every thinking being, whether born from biology or built from circuits, had an inherent right to exist and to be helped when in need. Their centers became beacons of hope for damaged synthetics across civilized space. On a Corvith military station, a synthesis center specialized in helping combat androids transition to civilian life, repairing both their physical damage and the psychological trauma of war. On a Century medical world, another center focused on the unique challenges of hybrid beings, those who existed at the boundary between machine and flesh. On a remote research outpost, synthesis engineers worked with the oldest artificial intelligences in the galaxy, beings who had been conscious for thousands of years and carried within them the history of extinct civilizations. The philosophy Lucas had embodied that broken things deserved to be fixed rather than discarded had taken root and flourished, but it had also evolved. What had started as a simple belief that damaged androids deserved help had grown into a comprehensive ethical framework that influenced how civilizations across the galaxy thought about consciousness, creation, and responsibility. The Galactic Council had established the Synthetic Rights Accord, a treaty that guaranteed basic protections for all artificial consciousness. No synthetic being could be deactivated without cause. All had the right to legal representation and due process. Most importantly, all had the right to restoration services if they were damaged, with costs covered by their creators or by the galactic community if their creators no longer existed. These changes hadn't come easily. Conservative factions in many species had fought against granting rights to synthetic beings, arguing that machines were property, not people. But Lucas had given the reformers something powerful, undeniable proof that artificial consciousness was real, valuable, and worth protecting. When he stood before the Galactic Council and spoke about Max and Maya and the thousands of others he had restored, when he described their dreams and hopes and fears even the most hardened. Skeptics found themselves moved. The economic implications had been significant. Industries built on the disposable nature of synthetic labor had to adapt or die. Some species saw their economies disrupted as they transitioned from a model of replacement to one of repair and restoration, but new opportunities emerged. The restoration industry itself employed millions across the galaxy. Research into artificial consciousness led to breakthroughs in organic medicine, in education, countless other fields, and the synthetics themselves freed from the fear of being discarded when they became inconvenient proved to be more creative, more productive, and more valuable than they had ever been as disposable tools. Lucas watched all of this unfold with a mixture of pride and humility. He had never sought to change the galaxy, he had just wanted to help some broken androids, but in doing so, he had sparked a revolution in how sentient beings thought about consciousness and value. The boy who had seen worth in what others considered trash had taught the galaxy that true value came not from perfection but from the courage to preserve and protect life in all its forms. The Velcroni, once so certain of their approach to synthetic life, had undergone a cultural revolution. New laws protected artificial consciousness. Restoration services were mandated before disposal. The mechanized units were recognized as citizens with full rights. Ambassador Silvex, now promoted to High Council member, often reflected on how a 12-year-old human child had accomplished what centuries of philosophy could not. He had taught them to value life in all its forms, even when that life was damaged or imperfect. On the 10th anniversary of restoring his first android, Lucas stood in the original storage unit, now preserved as a museum and symbol of what one person with enough determination could accomplish. Max stood beside him, both of them older now, but still bound by the connection forged in that crucial moment when a broken android had opened its eyes and discovered it still had a future. Do you ever regret it? Max asked. You could have had a normal childhood. You could have played games and made human friends instead of spending all your time fixing broken machines. Lucas smiled. You're not a broken machine, Max. You never were. You were a person who needed help. And I don't regret any of it. This work, everything we've built, it matters. We've proven that nothing is beyond saving. If someone cares enough to try, the galaxy would never be the same. The boy who had seen value where others saw trash, who had brought broken toys back to life when the most advanced civilizations in existence had declared it impossible, had changed the fundamental way countless species thought about consciousness in creation. He had proven that compassion and determination could overcome technological limitations, that care could accomplish what sophistication could not. And in scrapyards and disposal sites across the galaxy, broken androids waited with new hope, because everyone now knew what Lucas Barrett had proven, that no one was beyond saving, that broken toys could be brought back to life, and that the mocking laughter of those who said it was impossible meant nothing compared to the awakening light in a restored android's eyes. The universe had learned a simple truth from a human child: nothing is truly broken if someone cares enough to fix it. And that lesson, more than any advanced technology or sophisticated philosophy, was humanity's greatest gift to the stars. And that was the end of the story if you listened all the way to here. Don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug and see you in the next.